My biggest drive for this is I wanted this to be a space where everyone can share their feelings and they don't have to feel guilty about feeling guilty.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, the original holistic pet health coach, and I am so excited because I have with me today basically the speakers for our Healing Together, A Journey Through Pet Loss Symposium, which is a 4-hour online workshop that will take place on Saturday, November 2nd at 10 a.m. Eastern. And 4 p.m. Central European time, since we actually have two of us in that time zone. I'm so excited about this because I think it is such a needed thing. We talk about grieving and that sort of stuff, but I think that the group of speakers that will be involved with this event will help you take your understanding of that process and hopefully help you process the loss of a pet you may have experienced recently. But today I want to introduce them to you, and also the woman that conceptualized this event to help us share about our own loss and also to help promote healing, and that's Melissa Natanson. So the speakers will be actually everyone here. So Leanne Girk, who is a pet loss and grief counselor, Anya Gore, who is an animal communicator and healer, Sunny Gandira, also a holistic pet health coach who's got an amazing story to share with us, Sandy Reynolds, another certified holistic pet health coach who has another story to share. And then unfortunately, Melissa Sherman is unable to join us today because she is in Florida, thankfully safe, but out of internet. But she's also a holistic pet health coach and animal communicator. So on November 2nd, the symposium will address the importance of acknowledging and normalizing pet loss and grief, an overview of some coping strategies and healing techniques, insights into animal communication and the spiritual aspects of the human-animal bond, and then the role of holistic approaches in pet health and end-of-life care. And so today we'll offer you a little preview of what attendees can expect from the symposium. I'll drop a link in just a moment of where you can go to register. But first, I want to give you a little bit more detail on each of the speakers. So Leanne Girk is a certified pet loss and grief counselor with over 15 years of experience in the field. She is the founder of Mourning to Light Pet Loss and offers counseling and support groups for those grieving the loss of a pet. Leanne is also an award-winning author of the children's book, Dear Brave Friend, which addresses pet loss and grief. Anya Gore is an animal communicator, healer, and founder of Connected Souls. With a background in energy healing and massage therapy, Anya now focuses on animal communication, helping bridge the gap between humans and their animal companions. She's also the author of Life and Soul Dog, which shares her experiences and wisdom gained from her journey with her own dog. Sunny Gandara is the owner of Nacho Average Dog. I like saying that in a Southern way because it's more fun. And a certified holistic pet health coach. She is specializing in large breed dogs and those facing cancer diagnoses. Sunny offers personalized health consultations and holistic approaches to pet wellness, and she's also the co-creator of Compassionate Paws, a pet grief support circle, which is an online community for those who are grieving the loss of a pet. Sandy Reynolds is a certified holistic pet health coach and the owner of Enlightened Mutt. Based in Arizona, Sandy specializes in food sensitivity issues, senior pet care, and end-of-life support. Her approach focuses on identifying root causes of health problems and restoring pets to a state of balance through customized nutrition and holistic methods. And then lastly, Melissa Sherman is also a certified holistic pet health coach. Can you get the theme here? She's an animal communicator and energy healing practitioner. She's the founder of Calming Creek and specializes in trauma-induced behavioral issues, palliative care and end-of-life support for animals. She incorporates various energy healing modalities in her practice and is currently pursuing further certifications in pet nutrition and herbalism. So, ladies, welcome. This is such an amazing event. This is something that Melissa conceived of. And Melissa, I'm going to let you talk about that a little bit. What got you to thinking this is where we needed to go?
As the host of the Coaches Collab for you, Dr. Ruth, and interviewing so many of the holistic pet health coaches, I found that with every single interview I did, I left with a broken heart for my colleagues and tears in my eyes because the stories were gripping and heartbreaking. And I feel like every single one of us has gone through something tragic like this, and not only with the holistic pet health coaches, but with clients and just out in the universe, and knowing that as humans, we have a little bit of a hard time talking about grief the way it is. And I feel like those sentiments pass through into our pet world where we don't feel like we can express or talk about or know how to get through this. And I was starting to notice that colleagues and clients were feeling comfortable with just losing it all and having that emotion with me because I'm a safe space. And I feel, and this is why I approached you and the program director, Delora, because we can create that safe space, and we have, and we will be that safe space. And I think really what I aim to do and what we aim to do here is answer the question, what do we do when they're gone? And anybody who's listening, I want you to know that our hearts are behind this. And this is your safe space. This is the place where you can come and cry, you can come and heal, and you will be surrounded by some of the most incredible stories and incredible speakers with a wealth of background. And especially, we've got Dr. Ruth, who's going to be in here too.
And thanks, because I think this is really needed. We have a difficulty dealing with death as it is in the United States, and then couple that with the being that's leaving us, leaving this plane of existence, being a pet. And I think that there is better understanding now, but it's still not, people are not as fully supported as they should be. So kudos to you for pulling this together. And you're absolutely right. Almost every single person that enrolled in the Certified Holistic Pet Health Coaching Certification Program was doing it because of an experience they had with one of their own pets that they did not want anyone else to have to experience.
Great.
And that is some pretty profound motivation.
Yeah,
So
it was really big stuff. I was blown away by the stories, and I felt like we just couldn't let this sit. So thank you for helping me foster this idea, and I'm looking forward to all the healing we're all going to do together.
Beautiful. Leanne, you have been in this world for actually quite a bit longer in a really organized way than most of us have thought about. But as a pet loss and grief counselor, what are some of the common misconceptions about pet grief that you often encounter?
That's a great question. I can give you some great examples in my pet loss support groups. I've had people come and they'll say, I had no idea there was such a thing. And then I've had people say, I can't let my family know I'm here because they don't understand it. So it's a safe place to come. People are not feeling validated with the depth of their grief. And sadly, some people feel they need to hide it because not everybody understands. So I always like to share, excuse me, with my clients, share your pet story with the people that deserve to hear it. And that seems to help because not everyone will understand it. But they're thrilled that there is such a person that has counseling and that can help them through this grief, and that there's a support group. And it's grown tremendously throughout the country. It's very needed, and I think it's finally getting the attention that it needs. There's still ways to go, but we're getting there.
That is the truth for sure. So Can you share a technique or a strategy that you've helped people to learn to cope with the immediate shock of losing a pet?
One of the things, and oftentimes they won't come to see me for a few weeks after the death. And that's because right after, I believe they're in shock. They just cannot wrap their head around it that they've lost their dear pet. People come to me for so many different reasons, but one I'm going to share the main theme is guilt. Unfortunately, it seems when people are grieving, grief comes up. And I've been told maybe that's because if we feel guilty, that's better than feeling helpless. One thing that I help people with, I can't even tell you, I've heard about these amazing lives that these pet families have given their pet, that they will cry and say, oh my gosh, the woulda, coulda, shoulda. And all I heard was this beautiful story. So I try to remind them that when you ruminate in the sad ending of your pet, that final day, oftentimes people ruminate and they get stuck. So I remind them, just like a storybook, your pet's life has a beginning and a middle and an end. So I ask them, when you're stuck, go back and reframe. Think about when you first got your pet. Did you rescue it? Tell me about the beginning. How did you name it? The middle of the story. What were the adventures? And I'd say, write down all the things that you did for your pet throughout their life. And they are so shocked. They're huge lists of kind, thoughtful things that they've done. And then I tell them, yes, of course, the ending is part of their story, but it's not their whole story. So
Right
that
on.
seems to help too for the guilt.
That's amazing because that's something guilt definitely keeps us in a place we don't want to stay, which is tough.
Hard.
Yeah.
A few
Now,
other things. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, please go ahead.
I was going to say some other things that can be helpful. And again, this is based on everyone grieves differently. So this is helpful to a lot of people, but not necessarily all people. I encourage them when they're ready, and this is a tough one, to write their pet's obituary. I have read, I can't even tell you, the most beautiful obituaries written about their pets. It really shares their whole story, and it really, I think it's a way for them to share from their heart about their life. I recommend writing letters, maybe making a memory box, putting letters in there that you can save. It could be something like, if you feel you need to be sorry about something, you can say it. Dear so and so, I'm so sorry. Or it could be, I miss you because, or I know I'll be okay because of the things you've taught me, which were. So there's different ways that you can approach it. Some people would like a simple memorial, which is great. I had a few clients, I love this one. One of my clients' dog loved Cheetos and watermelon. So for their memorial, they had just a few friends come over, and they had a big bowl of Cheetos. They had sliced watermelon. And people came and ate their dog's favorite human food and just shared. And I know I shouldn't say this being a holistic
No Cheetos.
role, but it was special to them. And they heard so many stories about their pet they didn't know.
That's
Those are some
amazing.
things that are good to help. There's a lot more.
I bet. That's very cool, though. And little Cheetos, those are okay. So, cool. So, Anya, could you explain a little bit about what animal communication is and how that can be helpful to people that are grieving a pet? Big question.
It's a big what animal communication is a long story and perhaps not so simple to explain right here. But essentially, it is a way of connecting with another being, an animal in this case, intuitively through our intuitive senses beyond our normal senses, through what we call telepathy, among other things, through intuitive channels. And that's something that obviously I do. What my approach tends to be to helping people who are grieving their animal companion is the best way I have to help is to have a communication session with the animal and the person. We do it usually, it's live on Zoom, or the animal is with us in spirit. And this way we can really understand what's going on for the person. I can connect with their animal and bring them messages, bring them, honestly, it always is reassurance and comfort. My work also includes very much the time leading up to the end of life for an animal. And that's, in a way, even more precious, because then the animal has their say in how they would like to be remembered and what they would really appreciate, and often also will reassure their person quite profoundly about the whole thing of end of life, because they are so much in connection with these other dimensions that we often have forgotten to be connected to consciously, although we are connected. I don't know if that answers sufficiently, but one thing I do to share a lot about, I do it, I've been doing it since I lost Zoe, my dog, who I wrote my book about and all of that, is how much she, once she passed, helped me through the grieving process. So I share a lot of that with people. I think somehow finding that balance between going with it, going with the grief, going with the heartbreak, not resisting it, the balance between that and feeding it too much. So it's a sort of happy balance, a fine balance, which will be completely unique to every person and every animal. I know that my personal grieving of different animals throughout my life has been very different, not only because I was at a different stage of my own evolution at different times, but because they were each so individual.
Amazing. Is there a common thread in the messages that animals are wanting to convey to their humans in your experience after they've gone on to whatever is next?
Certainly, one common thread is all about guilt, because that is very often the overriding emotion that people go through. And inevitably, the animals reassure their person that there's absolutely nothing to be guilty of. And from their perspective, once they've passed on, guilt just isn't an issue anyway. So all they are exuding and feeling and somehow allowing to flourish within the person is love. And guilt is one of those emotions which we've all gone through, and I also know well, which blocks the path to love. It's a kind of barrier to love. And one of the greatest messages that I got from Zoe while I was really in the throes of the worst part of grieving was just to let my heart break, just to let it break. And that the breaking is also a breaking open of the heart. And just to go through that sort of portal, just to go through it. And when you do that, when you're able to do that, and often we do need support for that, of course, it gives a very different perspective on the experience. And we can then start to heal.
That is really interesting, because I think that's in our culture to avoid that heartbreak at any cost. And that is the going into the pit of the grief, I think, is so essential to move through the process.
Yeah, I mean, it hurts. Of course, we want to avoid it. It hurts.
Yes.
But it's that sort of pain that is cathartic, I suppose. Anyway, you can't pretend it's not there. And if you don't somehow find a way of allowing it, then it will hide somewhere else and come out sideways in other symptoms or depression or that sort of thing.
All the stuff we just don't want to deal with, for certain. Yeah. Hey, Sunny, as a holistic pet health coach, how do you approach supporting clients who are facing a terminal diagnosis for their pet?
Yeah, I'm also exploring other modalities, and I'm actually studying animal Reiki, and that has been incredibly helpful. And I try to support my clients the same way, because it is all about seeing the animal as perfect, no matter what, whether they have an illness or and just being present with the animal. Because we tend to be like, oh, poor thing, and I'm so sorry, and are you in pain? And then our dogs and animals in general, they really pick up on your energy, and that makes them worried. So I try to always remind my clients, and myself for that matter, if my own dogs are going through something, that we're just being in the moment and seeing them for the perfect being that they are. And it doesn't matter. They are not their illness. They are not, in my case, I deal with a lot of cancerous dogs. They are not their cancer. And really supporting them that there, but also allowing the feelings. I think, as both Leanne and Anya said, to allowing ourselves to be sad, but maybe not right in front of the dog or the cat, or whatever animal you have. So that's really what I'm trying to do, to just, it's not easy, but it's also not about masking your emotions, because that's something that I felt when I lost my dog Nacho, and who is, obviously the reason why I'm here, why I found you, and why I have a new direction in life. He really inspired me, is that it just was a life-changing experience, watching him pass away so suddenly. And I wanted to support everyone and not make them feel so alone. So I wish I had Leanne when I went through that, and Anya as well, because I went to an animal communicator. I do encourage people to seek out animal communicators, because you can get so many valuable messages from and comforting messages from your animals, because they are our healers, they are our teachers, and just to lean on them for so much wisdom that they have that we don't have. And again, just to open our hearts to what they have to tell us, and not tell a story about the animal, but just listen to them, I think is the most important thing.
That is excellent advice. And it's hard to stay in that
Yes.
place many times. Yeah. So when you're starting to work with a client who's got a pet with really a terminal condition or very advanced chronic condition, can you share some insights on how nutrition and lifestyle changes can actually help improve the quality of life for pets in their final stages?
Yeah, of course. Cancer is a result of chronic inflammation, and that starts with what you put in your mouth, right? It's obviously environmental too, but it really starts with your nutrition. And many of these dogs have been on the same dry kibble for their whole life. They're getting no moisture to flush out any toxins they're getting, whether it's from their food or from flea and tick medications, over vaccinations, things like that. So we start with that, and we already see after 2 or 3 weeks, even shorter, I would say, that they are getting a lot more energy. Their coat's starting to shine. They're like kind of the life in their eyes come back. And of course, they love the fresh food. And many people are like, oh, I have such a picky eater and he won't eat. And the most important thing is, when you have a dog with cancer, is it doesn't matter what kind of supplements, they have to eat, right, in order to go on. So really, that's number one. I really focus on that. Of course, supplements do their job as well in terms of probiotics and getting them the support there. But I really do focus on nutrition, and also really spending quality time with them, getting them exercise, getting them out, doing the normal things that you would do with a healthy dog, and not treat them as if they are incapable of anything. So that's where we start, really starting with nutrition. And then from a holistic standpoint, of course, I also recommend acupuncture is great, acupressure. Any of those modalities also help as well. And Reiki, of course. I'm a big fan of Reiki and energy work.
Sweet. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, you are specializing in senior pet care, and that has its own unique challenges. But what are some of the issues that come with caring and potentially losing an older pet?
A lot of times the pet already has some severe pain, chronic arthritis, different things like that. So if we can change up their diet, if they're not on a natural food, moist diet, just like Sunny said, the difference is crazy. Within just a couple of weeks, you can see a change in a dog, even that is very sick or dying. But I like to help my clients with, how do we handle that pain? What are the different modalities? Like Sunny said, acupuncture, acupressure, PEMF mats. Just, there's so many other things that pet parents can do at home to help their pet feel better. And in that token, if you can help them do that, you can take them for maybe a smaller walk. You're used to going for a longer time, but as they get sick and have harder times doing their normal daily activities, even if you go to the next house and back, they've gone out, they've done their sniffing, they've pottied, whatever, but to them, they've completed their walk. It doesn't matter. They don't know if it's 20 feet or a mile. And keeping their routine as normal as possible and them feeling the same is so beneficial.
That's so true. And one of the other things is, how do you help pet parents navigate that decision-making process when it comes to end-of-life care?
That's the important part that I learned with my last dog that I lost earlier this year. You were talking about the grief and the guilt, and I've always had that with other pets because you don't want to help them. But if they're in pain and they're suffering, you don't want to let them go on, but when is the right time? And that's something that I've really educated myself and learned a lot more about as far as planning ahead. I 100% agree with everyone else as far as using an animal communicator, because that will give you clarity. Your pet will tell you. I did a bucket list with Melissa Sherman for my dog, and it was amazing.
I think that
regrets. And so go ahead.
I agree. I think a bucket list approach is awesome, because that helps take us out of being in that place of grief and be in the present with the dog.
Exactly.
So that's an amazing technique.
It is very difficult for the anticipatory grief to deal with that. I found for myself that you just have to be extremely diligent on an hourly, daily, or minute basis. Sometimes enjoy the time you have. Don't think about them being sick. Don't wallow in the pity. Don't think about losing them. Be there with them. Pet them. My girl loved to have her head massaged, and so I sit there on the floor with her and watch TV and massage her head. And she really came to love acupressure on her hips where her back was having pain. She would come and lay in front of me and get in the position of where I could reach her. And they'll tell you if you listen to them. And once you start working with them and do some of the things that we can suggest to help you make them more comfortable, they'll show you it's the right thing.
That's awesome advice, because it's super hard to stay in the present, because we like to stay stressed out. It's sort of part of our way of being, sadly.
I don't know why that is, but it's terrible.
Oh man, I think it's a myriad of factors. Beth, speaking of stressing out, and Beth, I'm not saying that you are, but these are really important questions. So it's, holy smokes, this is the whole ball game right here. In terms of euthanasia, there's different cultural differences. For example, in Japan, where they are Buddhists, they don't do euthanasia. And so they have a much more advanced hospice system for animals. How do you help someone choose, okay, is it now, or maybe it's tomorrow, or maybe I've waited a day too long? And this is a tough one. And so as a veterinarian, what I always said is, you'll know. And that would just infuriate people. But then ultimately they did know exactly. And the pet, the dog, the cat was very clear. Okay, I'm done. So what do you all think? How does a pet parent make a choice? Yeah. Please.
I was going to share, I'm not going to talk too much about it at this time, but I recently lost my dog, and I do agree that a minute to do it, as hard as it is, it's hard for people to understand. Why would you want to euthanize your dog if they're having a good day? And that's really hard. And I encourage more veterinarians to talk to their clients and remind them that your dog may have a rally. And that's what happened to me. So it was so hard. I was like, oh my gosh, why would I do this? But what it also did was it reminded me how much Gracie had lost of her life that I had gotten used to, because I saw the spunky girl. So on her last day, it was a bright day for her. And she went out with the most She had a great goodbye. She had everything she loved. She was shaking with joy when she's just a little punk, 8 pounds, but she had 4 pieces of bacon and a half a cup of vanilla ice cream, and she was so happy. And you know what? That brought me comfort. It's really hard if they're having a crisis, because then you don't get those opportunities. And I had the opportunity to put flowers by her. That was a ritual I had to do, because sometimes we don't get that closure that we need. So I just wanted to mention the rallying part, that I think that's an important part people should be told about.
That is very true. And Anya, have you got some comments as well?
I think what I really wanted to say with that is that I truly believe there are no rules. I think we are all so different, as are our animals. And I think for each of us, and perhaps for me with different animals I've had, I would have been different as well. And I think that's why our individuality is important. One thing I did want to add, which is not totally related to that question, but it was something that Sunny said. While we don't want to, as I said before, feed the heaviness or the sort of big emotions when our animals are sick and so on, I actually do believe that we need to be completely honest with our animals, because they know in any case how we're feeling. We can't hide anything from them. They know us better than any of the people in our lives, probably, because they see us completely unfiltered, unmade up, in our worst state and our best. And they don't care. They love us as we are. So I do think it's important to be honest with them, and also to discuss with them, if it's possible, and I'm sure it is, even without an animal communicator, what their plans might be for their end of life. I've done that with 2 of my animals, and what they would prefer. So then that does answer that lady's question, Beth, I think it was, which about one day early, one day late. There might be some animals who want to be with us for whatever reasons. It could be because they want to be with us because they care about how we are feeling, or because they have a job to do for an X amount of time with us. And others might want to, as for Leanne, go in the full flush of having on a good day. I think it depends on the personality of the animal and the human being and what they can cope with, because my personal preference is to be with an animal and for them to have a natural death, and for me to be there to the absolute moment they pass and be with them, and without veterinary intervention if possible, and all of that. Sometimes it's not possible, and that sort of end of life care can be difficult to do when we have to be able to do it. So I think it's always a balance. But what I do know is, from all the clients I've spoken to and their animals, is that what counts is to be with us, and the animal is not going to judge us in any way for it being on this day or that day. So I think it's a whole sort of conglomeration of factors.
That's very true. And I think this is a situation where working with an animal communicator can make our comfort level with making the decision or not making the decision much better. And it's really tough. Sandy, Sunny, do you have any comments on this about how do you figure out, when do you choose?
I have always thought that if I really see that their quality of life has been reduced, and that's more if they're not eating or really struggling. But I do think that we are all very close to our dogs. And if we're really honest, we can feel into it and see, like you were saying, Dr. Ruth, I just know that this isn't fun anymore. What's the best thing for them to do? And it is hard because we have to make the decision. So it's not an easy one. But I feel if you're really working to be in tune with your animal, you will know. But of course, if the quality of life is where they can't get up, they don't drink water, they don't eat, what is the purpose? Then we're holding on to maybe something for ourselves versus thinking about the animal. And it is very challenging, but I think that would be I've had to let go of 3 dogs or 4 dogs actually that way. And they were all very clear. communicating to me that I'm okay now, I can go. And so I was fortunate. I never doubted it, even though it was the toughest thing I ever had to do. But yeah, again, yeah, you see the quality of life deteriorate, then for me, that would be a sign. But it's different for everybody. So
I think
And
what
then,
people also don't think about is that animals live in the moment. And so, as people, we're wrapped up in the emotions and yesterday and last month or what we haven't done and those kind of things. So, I always try to bring my clients to the space of live in today. And same thing as Sunny said, quality of life. If that's diminished, and a lot of times, Dr. Ruth, as like you said, your animal will tell you, look at their eyes. In my experience, if you know your pet by the change in their activity, eating, sadness, different things like that. And it is evident. Yeah. I've had a couple of animals that I felt like I almost should have done it the day before. You know what I mean? But you can't go back there and
Yep.
say woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's I did what I thought in the moment, and I felt that the animal, how they were doing that day. And sometimes you don't think it can get worse than it can. So
Agreed. And it's hard. Leanne, you had another comment, please.
I just wanted to say sometimes it's really hard for pet families to see the progressive changes. So it can be helpful either maybe have a friend or a family member come over every few months because they can see the changes, and also to keep track on a calendar. It might be Monday was a good day, Tuesday wasn't, or it might even be the morning was good, the afternoon wasn't. And it's when you see it on paper, it can help make that decision too, because we just see the changes. But hearing from somebody else that hasn't seen your pet, it can be very helpful.
That is an excellent point. And I was not smart enough to think about this when I was still in brick and mortar practice. But what I did see was when my mother was dying, that's what the hospice nurses did. And there it was in black and white, how good or bad the day was, because they were making all of those notes. And in fact, I was trying to remember the speaker. I think it's Dr. Kathleen
Kumi.
Kumi, thank
Kumi.
you. Yes, we did a very nice interview going through the nuts and bolts of how do you know? What's the process? All of that. And that was one of the things that she was able to point out is if you're journaling, then it's really clear to you what's changing because we tend to let our minds get things mixed up. So I think that's really important. And then the other parts of Beth's question is really tough. Allowing a natural death versus euthanasia, I think that's if you've got a hospice person backing you up, that becomes a much easier choice in terms of understanding what's going on, dying process, and then the process itself of getting close to death. So physiologically, I think we've touched on some of these things. They stop eating, the activity level goes way down. And this is where, and this is part of what Dr. Kumi was saying, this is where eating actually is going to make things worse. And so if they're still present, they want to spend more time with you, not eating is okay sometimes. But I think that what we all see as we begin to know that our pet is no longer able to stay with us is that their quality of life, if we think of markers like eating, drinking, activity level, interaction with the family, being able to do the things that bring joy, when that's down to say 20 to 30% of on a regular basis of what was normal for that individual, that to me is where to consider euthanasia. And I think, Leanne, you brought up the point of the rally. And I think that is a super valid one because there will be these like, wow, this is my dog back for about hours, maybe a day, and then you're back in that trough again. So I think these are all really, really important. One of the things that was interesting when I was training in Chinese medicine is they would use for animals that weren't eating, they would use the Shenzhen point, so the acupuncture point on the haired versus the non-haired juncture of the nose to see if we could stimulate appetite. But for Dr. Shea and my teacher, this was if they didn't respond to this point, either being needled or digging your fingernail in, then the chi was so low that they were ready to cross over, and in fact may need a little help to have more chi to cross over on their own. So I hope that's somewhat helpful. Ladies, any other comments on this particular, like the physiology and what you've seen in your own pets or while supporting other people's pets?
Can I say something just briefly?
Please.
Yeah, that reminded me what you were just saying about that acupuncture point and whether they might need help to pass on. And I know that when an animal has had a lot of medication, went through that myself with Zoe, it's actually harder for them to pass naturally than if they have not been on a lot of medication. So in those situations, I think in the end, it often is more helpful to help them over.
Agreed.
They kind
Agreed.
of can't let go as smoothly.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because the physiology is artificially amped up, but without the ability for the body to make its choice, so to speak. Other comments,
Say one
ladies?
more thing.
Please.
And I totally agree with you, Dr. Ruth. Most pets, they do lack their appetite. But I have to say, Gracie was a bit of an exception. So in my situation, my little one still ate, but everything else was awful in her life. But that's usually the sign. And I was waiting for that, but it didn't come. But again, that was just a rare exception. So I just wanted to say, in my particular case, it was a little bit different.
And that is a very valid point. We had that experience with Mona, our little dachshund, who literally would eat to the point where she would hurt herself. For Mona, that really was the last straw, but there was a balance between she still wanted to eat, but the rest of her quality of life was just
Right.
abysmal. And so that's where we made that choice for her. Yeah. Melissa, you have a comment.
I think it was more, I was just trying to encapsulate all of this in regards to how we can filter this in and help our viewers during this workshop. And part of what's going to be going on that day is we're talking about this now and what may be the signs and symptoms and physiology of what the pet is going through before we have to make that decision. That is one thing that we're going to be able to help with. In addition to, we're going to be there to support you after that decision has been made. And not only that, the anticipatory grief. Plus, if you've lost your dog or your pet, your kitty, your horse, it doesn't matter. Tragically, we don't always have this choice of whether or not euthanasia is even a possibility, because we're here for the tragic part about that too. And one of the things, Sunny and Sandy and Melissa Sherman, who couldn't make it in, their stories were some of the ones that really inspired me. Sunny is going to be sharing her story. She is courageous and brave enough to open her hearts to us, because we are going to grieve and heal together. And she's going to be sharing her story, and it's a whopper. Sandy is going to be sharing her story, and Sunny and Sandy had different experiences, but Leanne and Anya are going to be working with them through this during that live or during our symposium. And these are going to be, not only are you going to find some coping and healing skills, but you're going to be doing it with us. I know I went off on a thing here, but I wanted to wrap that up on how that is going to be integrated into symposium for the ultimate benefit of everyone.
And thanks for bringing that up too, because it's okay, but this is part of the uniqueness of this format, is that the goal is to give you tools to process prior to, during, and after that event. That's amazing, because this is not something that's been readily available. Cool. Ladies, we are drawing towards the end of our hour. Any other comments or things that you want to have folks be aware of, or maybe speak a little bit about? So it sounds like we'll have some different approaches to understanding grief and the processing of it, but any other comments about what you're hoping your part in the symposium will bring to people and help in terms of helping them process and understand grief?
I'm going to be talking about anticipatory grief and how that can impact the end for your pet and yourself. The things that you can do proactively ahead of time that really will help you emotionally deal with it. And I find that if you're more prepared for X, Y, or Z, and you've at least processed it before you're in a moment that you can't, you have more control over the situation. And therefore, you can feel that you make the right decision for you and your pet. I think most of us have experienced tragic loss and you didn't have an opportunity to really think about it for a minute or to feel like you made the right decision. And even though we don't want to think about it ahead of time, if you do have a pet that is terminal or you've gotten a diagnosis that you know your pet is not going to survive from at some point. So whether that's a 6 months, 2 months, 2 weeks, whatever, you can at least proactively look at what that looks like, deal with some decision making ahead of time. Just like Dr. Ruth, you mentioned having a hospice vet or someone available. That's part of what I'm going to talk about and what they can do for you and how that will help.
That's awesome. Thanks. Cool.
One last
Ladies, if
wrap-up.
you'll, yes.
One thing that I really want everyone to know is that my biggest drive for this is I wanted this to be a space where everyone can share their feelings and they don't have to feel guilty about feeling guilty. One thing that I learned from Leanne in all of her counseling is that people feel guilty about having a harder time with the loss of their animals than they do with some of the humans in their lives. If this is you, be with us because this is your space. This is your space to heal. In the holistic pet health world, this is part of it. We can help them live well and take care of you after they're gone.
Amazing. And that's exactly it. Go ahead, Leanne.
Thank you for bringing that up, Melissa. Were you done?
Yes, I'm done.
That was a great point. A lot of people I know are going to say, oh gosh, I can't say anything. I'm going to cry, or I'm just, it's okay if you cry during this. You know what? You loved your pet. Everybody is welcome. And like Melissa said, for some people, it's as hard, if not harder, than losing a human family member. Parents, if you're worried about, gosh, how do I talk to my kids about losing a pet? Should they be at the euthanasia? What about the elderly? For some of those people, not only are they grieving the loss of their pet, but they're also grieving that might be the last time they're a pet parent. It can go in all different angles. We just want to validate you, let you know you are not crazy. People think they're crazy with these thoughts. You're not. It's the old saying, the more you love, the more you grieve. And we are all here to pick you up and to listen to you. So please join us.
Right on. And Karen is sharing about, she does a lot of rescue work, and I think many of our community members do. And it's really hard when you lose multiple dogs in a row. I think that the beautiful thing is that this symposium and the other information that's available currently, I think will help to alleviate that. And I've experienced that in my career where I just shut down emotionally because I had to continue providing euthanasias. But for those of us working in rescue, especially, I think it's critical to figure out a way to support ourselves so that we don't go into this fatigue. So compassion fatigue or caregivers fatigue. For those of you that I've dropped the link a couple of times, I want to just show you the page where you can go to register for the symposium. Jump over here, join us for free. Just drop your name and email. There's a bit more information about the event, who should attend, all of this good stuff. But I think this is going to be an incredible wealth of information and a way for people to have a more realistic way to approach the grief process and to sorting through some of this. And it's just some of the comments here are just amazing. Yvette, thanks for sharing what your experience has been, and Pam, yours as well. And yeah, and so Grow with Jahir, that's our goal, is learning how to prepare for and navigate that emotional impact of losing a pet, especially if it's a sudden loss. So I think this is going to be just critical for you to come join us so that you can really learn from this material and from our panel of experts in different ways to help. But yeah, it's so hard. So whoops. Um, so feeling isolated after losing a pet and not being able to find a supportive community is not an uncommon experience. So this is part of why we're doing this, to provide you a group and a safe place to share that information and to be witnessed in your grief and honored in it as well. The other thing that's cool is that when you do register, you can upload a photo of a pet that you really want to memorialize and have that loss witnessed, so that I think that when the animal is grieved and honored by a community, that helps us as pet parents go through that process as well. That's what I have for you tonight. I am extremely excited about this. I think this is going to be an amazing event, and it's so timely as well. Right as we enter the last part of fall, early winter, this is where many of these things come back up for us. So again, November 2nd, that's a Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll be spending about 4 hours together, helping you walk through this process, allowing you to be witnessed and allowing you to help support everyone else that's there, because as a community, we can start to heal together and provide that safe space to do so. Until then, sign up. You'll get a little bit of information between now and then. Melissa, hats off to you for really realizing how necessary this was and for getting this organized, because it is something that we don't want to talk about frequently. Well done. And Anya, Leanne, Sandy, Sunny, and Melissa Sherman, when you're hopefully able to float back in, really appreciate you providing your time, putting your hearts into this, and come register. It's a completely free event. I think it's going to be well worth your Saturday with us. So until then, drop this link one more time. Definitely go sign up, get registered, and come spend Saturday with us. So until then, you all take good care. Give your buddies a big kiss on the head and tell them how much you love them. And let them know that you're going to find some help to help support you through this process. So until November 2nd, we look forward to seeing you. Thanks so much for your attention tonight. Bye-bye.
Positive vibes.